Good evening, Jim.
Hello.
Let's see, do we have Brian Yates here?
Yes.
This is Brian. I'm on the line.
Hi, Brian.
Howdy.
I'm having some speaker trouble, but I'm gonna try to muscle through it. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. My name is Eric Hurd. I'm president of the Woodlands Water Agency Board of Trustees. I'd like to welcome you all to the February 2021 meeting of our board. And I think, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call. Brian, you may have been going to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Ron Wilson, are you present?
Here.
Kyle Mays?
Here.
Paul Martin?
Here.
Courtney McIntosh?
Here.
Ron Cucci?
Here.
Jan Price?
Here.
Scott Custer?
Here.
Laura Norton?
Here.
Bob Lux?
Here.
Very good. Well, thank you all for being here. So I suppose before I call the meeting to order, Brian, do you want to go over the rules of engagement for this evening?
This is Brian. Happy to, Eric. I'll keep it brief. I know we've got a lot to cover. So as in prior meetings, please be advised that the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. As in our prior remote meetings, please be sure to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. And finally, we need to continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Also, as in prior meetings, we do need to perform a roll call for everyone who's in the meeting this evening. I'll go through the Woodlands Water staff, then the River Authority staff, then consultants, and then any members of the public. Eric has covered the Board of Trustees. So we will start with Jim Stinson with Woodlands Water.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Here.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Here.
Any other members of Woodlands Water in the meeting? Okay, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting this evening?
Matt Vaughn is here. Aaron Schindewolf is here.
Randy Peterson is here.
Suha Jarudi is here.
Anyone else from the River Authority? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Woodlands Water Consultants. Do we have any Woodlands Water Consultants in the meeting? Okay, if not, we will move on to members of the public. If you could go one at a time. Maureen Bourgeois does have a list of all the phone numbers that are dialing in. So if we have someone that does not identify themselves, Maureen is going to call out the phone number and ask for that person to identify themselves for the record. So we'll start with whoever would like to go first, and we'll just make our way down the member of the public list.
John Yours, Mud 36.
Tim Hartzell, Mud 47.
George Newman, Mud 46.
Albert Tom Chesson, Mud 60.
Lance McLeod, Kimley Horn.
Steve Coonan with Plummer Associates.
Gary Miller.
Amy Bradshaw, Woodlands resident.
This is Brian. Any other members of the public?
Dr. Shelley Sekula Gibbs, the Woodlands Township Board, One Water.
Stephanie Zertucha, Mud 7.
Okay, this is Brian. Any other members of the public? Okay, Maureen, were there any other numbers that have not identified themselves?
There's a Sue Ellen Myers and a Mark, I believe that's Mark Unland.
Yes, I thought I identified myself, Sue Ellen Myers, Woodlands resident.
Okay, this is Brian. Mark Unland, are you on the line?
He's there.
Anyone else, Maureen?
I believe that's Bob Lux, and I didn't remember hearing his name.
Well, this is Brian. Bob is one of our trustees, so.
Recording. I didn't catch that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that will then cover the roll call. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Eric to begin the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very
And
much.
there was a number that just joined, ending in 4300.
I think that's Eric's phone.
Yeah.
Do I need to mute this? Is that better? Can everybody hear me?
This is Brian. That's better. Yes, there's not the echo.
Okay. Yeah, my microphone on my computer was acting up. I'm sorry for the disruption. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Is that correct?
This is Brian. That's correct.
Okay, very good then. I'm going to call the meeting to order to the extent I didn't already do it, I suppose, and then move on to item 2 of the agenda, our opening invocation. If you'll join me. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, this opportunity to serve for each of us. We ask that you give us wisdom and discernment and power through your Holy Spirit. Please bless our meeting, bless our community, bless our nation. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you all. Let's move on to item 3, receive comments from the public. We have quite a few folks here. To the extent anyone wants to make a comment, I'll just ask if you try to keep it to 3 minutes or less, because we've got quite a few items to cover tonight. So having said that, I'll open the floor. If you want to speak, state your name, and then you have the floor.
Hello, this is Dr. Shelley Sekula Gibbs. Eric, may I say something?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be with you tonight. I wanted to support item 8, if I may, which is a timely improvement of the Tin Man, which relates to wastewater treatment plant number 1, and particularly folks who live in Lakeside Cove. So that's number 8. I'm also here to support information and an appropriate management of the situation related to number 14, regional subsidence and groundwater research from HARC, and I'm very supportive of that. And I also wanted to let everybody know that I and others, including Chairman Gordy Bunch, spoke to the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District last night in favor of adding subsidence into their calculations for future DFCs and desired future conditions of the aquifer. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? Okay. I'm assuming that's no other comments.
This is Tim Hartzell. I just wanted to chime in. Mud District number 47. I'm here just trying to monitor what's progressing with the water, wastewater plants is after reading in the paper about some idea about redesigning them or consolidating them. I'm just a little bit concerned about the cost. So I'm trying to listen in onto the meetings to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be receiving some information about that on item 10 on the agenda, Tim. Okay. Any other comments, or shall we move on? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here. So we're going to move on to item number 4. This is all part of we've got 4, 5, and 6 that are the consent agenda. So we'll discuss each one individually, and then we'll vote on them all together. Item 4, review and act on the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of January 2021. Any comments or discussion? If there's no comments or discussion, then I'd like to call, I guess we'll move on to item 5, review and act on the financial reports and disbursements of January 2021. Maureen? Maureen, did you want to give the report?
Are these being pulled out of the consent agenda?
Just as a reminder, they've been placed in the consent agenda for the efficiency and streamlining of the meeting. We won't give a detailed report unless somebody asks to pull them from the consent agenda.
Okay. All right. Any discussion about the financial? Any discussion about the financial reports or disbursements? All right. There being none. Item 6, consider review of annual salary survey of wage rate scales and consider adoption of resolution adopting prevailing wage rate scale for construction projects, which you should have there. Any discussion on that item? Okay. There being none, I will entertain a motion to approve item 4, 5, and 6 on the consent agenda.
This is Trustee Lux. I so move.
I'll second that. It's Norton.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. I'll go through. I will now vote. I, Eric Hurd, will vote in favor of that motion. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul Martin?
Aye.
Hardly McIntosh?
Aye.
Ron Cucci?
Aye.
Jan Price?
Aye.
Scott Custer?
Aye.
Laura Norton?
Aye.
Bob Lux?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda item number 7, receive the regular monthly SGRA Woodlands Division report.
Good evening, everyone. This is Chris Meeks. Just a brief report this month. Back in September, we had reported a water leak that we had on Sparkleberry and Moonvine, which is just west of the resort center. So that repair was fixed at the time, but during the actual break itself, water did disrupt the property, the drainage, the landscaping, as well as did enter the house of one of the residents. So I wanted to come back and let y'all know we're following standard procedure that Woodlands Water follows as well when there's damage to the property. So we've asked the homeowner to file that on their homeowner's insurance, and then we'll pay up to the deductible to reimburse them to make them whole. So all repairs are complete to the home. We are asking the homeowner to file under homeowner's insurance, and we're going to go from there. Any questions I can answer on that occurrence or anything else?
All right, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Item number 8, receive the SGRA staff information on the final engineering cost estimate and procurement process for the Tin Man.
Well, good evening. This is Chris Meeks again. I am going to share a presentation. If you could, let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Thank you. So we've presented on the Tin Man before, as the trustees are aware. Last month when we were talking about the Tin Man, there was questions on why the design cost had increased from $130,000 to approximately $197,000. So this presentation is going to walk through the items and just kind of explain why the increase. So what we have here is the final fee and task proposal that did go to our board last month. It was approved by our board contingent on no objections from the trustees this month. So what you're going to see on the left-hand side is everything that's in the final proposal. The item that you see fan test as bolded and underlined, that item was not in the original fee proposal. And as you can see on the right side, the fan test is approximately $50,000, which is the bulk of the increase from 130 to 197. There were also some other minor items because the original 130 was just a guesstimate. So when we kind of got in there and fine-tuned it with the consultant, some of those other items were just up a little bit, but the bulk of it was for the fan test. So then the question comes in, why is the fan test added? So the fan test is important for a few different reasons. Excuse me, as you can see here, we want to make sure, in essence, that the vacuum that we are going to pull on the actual collection system, it does pull the area that we're looking for. It doesn't stop short of what the previous fan was pulling. It doesn't pull too far past. So we don't want to basically undersize or oversize the equipment. And of course, the very last bullet is kind of the punchline. We want to avoid costly mistake by purchasing and installing adequately sized equipment. So we don't want to, basically, we don't want to buy something too big or too small. And so when we're looking at the fan test area, this is a map of course, everything south of Woodlands Parkway for the most part, majority Mud 6. And down here at the bottom left, you can see wastewater plant 1 just above that lakeside cove. The Tin Man's original installation was to reduce the odors in the yellow circled area. So the fan test will help us make sure that we are pulling a vacuum within the sewer lines in that area. Just as an example of what a fan test looks like, that's a picture of just a fan test that was installed in a different city, different location, just used as an example. But you can see on the left-hand side, kind of towards the middle, I guess to say, that is the manhole, and then of course the ductwork and the fan that's put on top of it. Another question that came up is, why was the schedule delayed a little bit, if you will, extended? So this is the original schedule on your screen that you're looking at. Everything in there that we're looking at is still in the final proposal. But the one item when we're talking in general terms and say how long will it take to design a project, this item right here is generally what we're talking about. What we will start including going forward is this item right here, which you can see in the very last line, contractor procurement. Once the design is done, we have to solicit proposals. And so that process generally takes somewhere between 2 and 3 months for us to get the documents together, put them on the street, allow contractors to actually have enough time to review them, propose on them, for us to score them, rank them, then take that item not only back to y'all, but also back to our board for approval. So that 3 to 4 month delay from, we thought this would be done in October, well, design will be done roughly in October, but the actual construction would not start till basically at this point, looking at February 1st. And with that, do you have any questions?
Looking at that picture of the fan test device that was sitting on the side of the road. Yeah. How does that work? It looks like on the left side of the thing, that's over a sewer manhole. Is that sucking air from the sewer lines? Tell me how that works.
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly it. So what we're looking to set up is essentially what the Tin Man used to be before we took it down. We're looking to put a fan, which is the black box on your right, in the location, and then ductwork over to a manhole and create a vacuum so we do suck the air out of the manhole. And in this case, it's just going to be straight pulling it out and venting it to an open environment. So there will be odors similar to what the Tin Man expressed just during this trial period. At the end of the day, though, the actual true installation will have not only the fan there, but we'll also have a scrubber unit tied to it. So this device,
It will also have a what tied to it?
a scrubber,
Okay.
something to remove the odors coming.
Is that what the biotrickler is, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Chris, this is Trustee Lux. Is there more than one manhole that will be sampled, or is this is it one or more than one manhole?
At this point, we're looking at one manhole. We've looked at the collection system over years and selected the manhole based off of where the Tin Man was located prior. And so right now we're looking at that manhole. When Kimley Horn actually does the work and survey and everything else, if they identify another manhole that would actually be better, then we'll be testing on that one manhole. But we're looking to do 2 fan units of 2 different sizes to confirm their proper size, but on one manhole.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim. So let me know what we're doing here.
On this particular item,
we've received the information. So
yeah, there was no action. They were authorized to move forward with that design last month, but they were instructed to come back and report on how we got to this point, and that's what we were doing tonight.
all right. Very good. So they're moving forward. Chris, can you confirm that your team is moving forward with the design?
This is Chris Meeks. I can confirm we actually have a kickoff scheduled for, I believe, this Friday. It'll definitely be within the next week. We will have a kickoff and then have Kimley Horn move forward.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 9 on the agenda, discuss setting standards. So if the board approves a project with preliminary costs and a schedule estimate, and the cost or schedule will change meaningfully, the topic will be represented. Brian or Jim?
This was a request from Trustee Scott Custer to have this as a discussion and action item. Probably it was prompted by the discussion on the Tin Man cost, preliminary engineering costs going up.
Yeah, this is Scott Custer. It was due to a 50% increase effectively in that initial cost, and then a plus 4 or 5 months, whatever it was on the schedule. Those to me are significant deviations that should just trigger some sort of an automatic update to this board.
And just for the President Hurd, I don't disagree. I think that this is that we probably should come back and represent items that have been approved with substantial increases in either the construction or design schedule or the cost. So I don't have any objection with this in principle at all.
Is there an industry standard percentage increase that we would use as our guide?
I don't have that to present tonight. I'll be happy to do some research and bring that back at another meeting.
And then I assume, Brian, and we would need to do a policy amendment. Is that correct?
This is Brian. I don't believe there's a specific policy on this. We would have to we would have to look into that or determine if it would be best handled by a policy or a resolution by the board.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let's put this on our agenda for next month. Jim, if you could do some research on industry standard and have a recommendation. And Brian, if you could let us know whether we need to do a policy creation, amendment, or just a resolution.
Happy to do so.
And then we can get it buttoned up at the next meeting if the board should decide to. Sound good?
This is
This
Scott
is
Custer.
Brian,
Yes,
that
that's
works.
perfect.
Okay, good. Anything else on this item?
President Hurd, I'd like to ask Mr. Meeks one more question, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Chris, this is Trustee Lux.
Yes, sir.
Has this project been evaluated as a potential candidate for a design build approach as opposed to design bid build to improve the schedule?
This is Chris Meeks. You're talking about the Tin Man, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yes, sir. That is one option that we're looking at with this for multiple different reasons, warranty being one, markup being another, but we are looking at any options, Kimley Horn will as well, to kind of speed up the construction of this item.
Will that be included in next month's update?
I do not believe between now and next month, us nor Kimley Horn would have enough time to actually fully vet it out and give you a fully informed decision. So once we cross that bridge, we can definitely come back and show these are the different options, potential timelines and pros and cons and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Let's move on now to item 10 on the agenda. Receive information from SGRA and the Woodlands Division and the Woodlands Water Audit Committee regarding centralized wastewater treatment.
This is Chris Meeks again. I will share my screen. If you could, let me know when you can see it.
Yep.
I can see it.
Thank y'all. Okay, so this is the topic that we've talked about for a number of months now, and rightfully so. It's a big ticket dollar item, so I want to make sure all the information is out there that I can give out there. I will tell you, we've met, SGRA, Woodlands Water have met with the audit committee, I believe 3 times, multiple discussions, multiple hour meetings, presented a lot of information, including last week. So the presentation I'm gonna go through today has all the key relevant facts. It's a slimmed down version, but it is still roughly 14 slides long. If at any point in this presentation you have questions, please stop me. What we wanted to do is present an option to the trustees that basically says, rather than what our current plan is that we've talked to the trustees about, here's an alternate item before we continue going down the current path we're in and placing a lot of concrete in the ground and millions of dollars. So I want to present all the facts and then hear what y'all have to say. So to kind of start with, we thought it'd be good to say, where are we today? This, for all sakes and purposes, is the current plan. So as we sit today, what I call replace as you go plan. It's basically what you're looking at. This is wastewater plant 1 and the conceptual renewal of plant 1 over a 24-year period between 2021 and 2045. So some facts about plant 1 real quick. The current permit is 7.8 million gallons per day, or MPD. To rebuild basically plant 1, you're looking at a master plan design permitting of this between 2021 and 2025. That's just to get all the phasing properly completed and everything else. And just a side note, when you are rebuilding a plant that's in operation, it's similar to heart surgery, if you will, in some case, because we have to remove key components of the plant while keeping the plant in operation. It can be done, but it's also expensive because you have to keep the plant operating and permits met. So what we've looked at is a rough order of magnitude cost, a ROM cost for in-kind replacement. So construction is in 4 phases over a 20-year period. The map on your right is basically color coded to those different phases over that 20-year period based off of condition and service life and expected service life. So if you're looking at just wastewater plant 1, excuse me, the rough order of magnitude cost, including a 3% inflation per year between today and 2045, replaced as you go, is roughly $210 to $274 million. And that's literally going through and rebuilding the entire plant, because the plant is just about 50 years old. It's give or take 46 years old. So over that 20-year period, you're going to be almost 70 years. Concrete in the wastewater environment generally lasts somewhere between 50, maybe 60 years. So then we look at wastewater plant 2. And for this presentation, we've just consolidated and just looked at wastewater plants 1 and 2 because they are the most expensive and the largest facilities. By comparison, wastewater plant 3 is less than 1 million gallons a day. But what you're looking at here is wastewater plant 2. Wastewater plant 2 is younger, if you will, and it will reach 50 years of service right around 2045. And then over a 20-year period, we would have to look to rebuild wastewater plant 2, just like we did wastewater plant 1. So following the timeline between 2021 and 2045, you rebuild wastewater plant 1. When you're done rebuilding plant 1, you go over to wastewater plant 2 and you rebuild wastewater plant 2 over a 20-year period. Wastewater plant 2 is smaller, so it's only 6 million gallons a day. You have the same master plan, permitting design, rough order magnitude for in-kind replacement, construction to 4 phases over 20 years. In rough order of magnitude cost, 3% inflation per year, 271 to 354 million.
So that wastewater plant number 2 is quite a bit more expensive than replacing wastewater number 1. Why is that so much?
Correct. And what we're looking at here is with wastewater plant 2, you're primarily looking at the inflation because you're not looking to start construction for another, give or take, 24 years. Then when you start, you have 20 years on top of that. So the last project would be completed in roughly 40 years from today.
Okay, thanks.
So then that brings up the question of, is it more efficient to consolidate? So what you're looking at here is a map of the Woodlands and the service boundaries, as well as wastewater plants 1, 2, and the top right is wastewater plant 3. Wastewater plant 1, 45 years old, sitting on 17 acres, it's landlocked, and it's 500 foot to the nearest home. I don't have any space at plant 1 to expand wastewater plant 1. With wastewater plant 2, it's 22 years old, but it sits on 25 acres and roughly only half of it's been used. And of course, it's 315 foot to the nearest home. So one of the items we were talking about when—
Excuse me,
Yes,
since
ma'am.
you wanted me to interrupt you.
No,
On
please
that
do.
last slide, you say that wastewater plant number 2 is 315 feet to the nearest home. If you expand it fully, would you then get closer to maybe 200 feet to the nearest home?
We haven't measured exactly how close you would be, not knowing where the processes would be and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
But the general location, I would guesstimate you would be no closer than 250 foot to the home. It's maybe right around 300 foot. You would get a little bit closer because you're going more north and the homes are closer in that area, but they're still to the west.
So just at the size that it is now, you're 315 feet to the nearest home.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, please interrupt. Any questions you have, I'd love to answer anything I can and give all the information I can. So some of the pros and cons we've been looking at and talking to the audit committee about, left side, obviously pros, right side is the cons. Left side, a lot of different things. It is a long-term plan. When the 3 plants were originally installed, they were, they've had 4 phases. Wastewater plant 1's had 4 phases of upgrades over that 45 years. Wastewater plant 2 has had 2 phases. Wastewater plant 3's had 2 as well. So this is another long-term plan. This is looking at where's the Woodlands going to be in 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, what capacity is needed, and so on. This, of course, allows for a consolidation of assets, more efficiency and effectiveness, reduced O&M expenses, improved odor control, sustainability options could be there, and of course, right now, low interest rates. On the right, of course, it is a pricey option. You know, it's rather than wastewater plant 1 or 2 replace as you go, and you could fund that 2 to 300 million per plant over a 20-year period. In this case, you'd be looking at the cost all at once. So you would be looking at initial rate increases, which we do have some estimated numbers on, and then of course it's a timeline of 5 to 10 years for the items that you see there.
You know, looking at this slide, it gives me the idea that, you know, since wastewater plant number 1 is at the lowest elevation, it might have been a great thing if we had taken the opportunity to buy property next to plant 1, and maybe instead of Side Cove being developed, have it be part of the land that is wastewater plant number 1. Wow. But what about, are we going to get to the cost? I've heard a lot of people question this discussion with us pumping waste uphill. I looked through the board packet and I didn't see mention of that. What kind of costs are involved in that?
So that's one thing I can answer here in a few slides if you'll let me answer that here.
This is Scott Custer. Can you say more about improved odor control on the left-hand side, please?
So on the left-hand side, the improved odor control as well as the expanded sustainability options, those are options that are available at the replace as you go, the current plan, as well as with a consolidated facility. Part of it though is the existing facilities and structures that we have today are not set up for basically covers and bio trickling filters and so on and so forth. So there's a cost to that. So those two options can be done either way that you go. It's just there's a cost associated with either a retrofit for odor control or sustainability type options, or you actually plan for that and the trustees say, we would like reuse coming out of wastewater or the consolidated facility. And then you actually design that facility to have that in mind where you want to go. It's usually cheaper when you design and build it to include those rather than to kind of add it on later.
So would it be correct to say then, in terms of the unique advantages, bullet points 2, 3, and maybe with respect to odor control or sustainability, you're saying there's a possibility that it's more cost effective relative to your wave 1, wave 2 model, or whatever you're calling the renewal as you go. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is more cost effective. There's also newer technologies out there, the way it could be designed. And so it may not always need a cover or trickling filter with the new design. It could just be the way that the new technology or the way the facilities are situated. Maybe it's something where all the buildings are put on the outside and all the processes are in the middle of it, for example.
Okay, thank you. This is Scott. Just by way of commentary, I'd encourage you to really try to focus on the unique advantages versus the wave 1, wave 2, like current low interest rates, for example. It's going to apply no matter what, or if we choose something, right? So that would be helpful if you could think about that.
Sure, I will definitely, as we go through, I'll point those out. So then we move to the conceptual consolidated wastewater facility. So there's 2 options included in this presentation. With this one, it's expanding wastewater plant 2. What that means, as you can see on the right, the current permit, as we talked about earlier, 6 million gallons a day. Conceptual permit would be 14, which is basically where I take wastewater plant 1 and 7.8, just rounded up to 8 MGD, and we demolish wastewater plant 1 and all the flow goes over to wastewater plant 2. So the 6 plus 8 equals the 14. What this option does do for you is it maximizes the service life of wastewater plant 2. So earlier when we were talking that wastewater plant 1 needs to be rebuilt between 2021 and 2045, wastewater plant 2 between 2045 and 2065, this allows you to get that full use out of wastewater plant 2. Now, wastewater plant 2 does still need to work between 2045 and 2065 in this option. But what you're looking at is master plan permitting design 21 through 25. Got to slide on that a little bit. Construction, high level 2025 through 2030. Rough order of magnitude cost, including 3% inflation per year. This is for the plant only. This does not answer Ms. Norton's question from earlier, but just the rough order of magnitude cost to expand the facility, 100 to 151 million. Now, with the conveyance of the flow from wastewater plant 1 to wastewater plant 2, we have not looked into that. That's one thing we were looking at the feasibility study. There's multiple different options and ideas and thoughts and different ways you can kind of skin the cat, if you will. You could put a large lift station in at the site of wastewater plant 1 and pump the flow over to wastewater plant 2. You could put in a series of, or a tunnel or a series of tunnels. You could change lift stations around. There's multiple options to do it. In any which way that you kind of look, there's going to be land acquisition that's needed. The Woodlands is already developed and the roads are there. So we have to look and see where the easements we have or where the right of ways are. And it was a large ticket item at that point. So we do not have those costs at this point in time.
So waste from my house would go down to plant number 1 and then go up and then go to plant number 2.
Potentially, there's in the feasibility in a few slides, we have a for the conveyance of the sewer from plant 1 to plant 2. We've listed 2 options, as you'll see in a minute. One is to put in a lift station, which will do just what you said. The second option is the creative options, as I call it, which allows the consultant to look at all the various options and see which one is most cost effective and efficient, and then propose that item.
This is Scott Custer. In this proposal, your point of view on what happens with the existing land after the demolish of the treatment plant, I guess assuming that part of that no longer becomes needed, depending on your lift station or creative solution, do you have a proposal for what happens to that land?
That has been roughly kind of looked at and talked about. Part of it is this wastewater plant 1 does house our administration, operations, and maintenance facilities. So a chunk of the land is still potentially needed unless we wanted or needed to rebuild those facilities at wastewater plant 2, which then of course limits the plant capabilities. So the general, I mean, they're still going to be looked at. General thought was if these buildings are here, they're still in good condition. No need to rebuild them at this point. So it might just be based on where the lift station may be, plus the admin offices, there's not too much land that could be sold and potentially what value. So it's still up in the air at this point, but one option may be to either sell the land if there's anything there, or maintain the land and use it for maintenance storage yards and such. But these are options to look at with the feasibility study, and after that as well, and see what's the most bang for the buck. What would it be most beneficial for? Because as we all know, land in the Woodlands is hard to come by, especially when you're talking this many acres. And so if it's sold or given up and we need additional land, it's going to be hard to come by. Another option that is on the table, I guess to say, for the feasibility is the conceptual consolidation of both facilities, wastewater plants 1 and 2. And basically you go over to wastewater plant 2 and you build a brand new 14 MGD facility. This option demolishes over time, of course, wastewater plant 2 entirely and one single facility. There's pros and cons with this. One is that you won't have to go back to wastewater plant 2 in 20 years and start rebuilding wastewater plant 2. Of course, one of the bigger cons is the service life remaining at wastewater plant 2, which is give or take 25 years, would not be there because you wouldn't use it, you would demolish it. But conceptual permit of 14 MGD, 12.5 acres of land available. That's the portion just north of the plant there. course, the same timeline as the expanding of 8 MGD. Rough order of magnitude cost, including the 3% inflation and plan only, 186 to 280 million. So it's when we started looking at these numbers, that's when it kind of said, okay, is this something that's actually feasible financially that we should actually take to the trustees audit committee and get some more voting on? And so what we looked at.
Sorry, this is Scott. Man, just ask a clarifying question, I think, on what you just said. I hadn't internalized that. So I think what you just said is in your option number 1, sorry, I'm going to show it, that's adding on to treatment plan 2.
Yes.
Something new. Does that mean that in your renewal, that the renewal costs are still valid that you identified in your status, in your wave 1-2 plan to the facility here untouched?
Yes, sir.
So it's really 100 to 151 million plus, depending on when you do it, up to 354, because you still have to do this. That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, some of that number will be reduced on the renewal of wastewater plant 2, because in the expansion of wastewater plant 2, some of the assets will need to be reworked. So in order, basically, so we do not have 2 wastewater plants over there, we have to intertwine them. And so some of the processes at wastewater plant 2 would need to be rebuilt. And so some of those numbers for the renewal of wastewater plant 2 would be reduced.
Chris, if you build a new plant, do you have to reroute the sewer almost throughout the whole Woodlands? Or are you going to be shipping the waste all around?
What we'd be looking at doing is more on the conveyance side. So it's either leave all the lifts. There's 30 lift stations in the Woodlands, by the way, that's outside of our facilities, outside the wastewater plant. So it's either go through some of those lift stations and change where they're pumped and change the actual piping. That's an option. An option is to put in a tunnel from wastewater plant 1 over to wastewater plant 2, put a very deep lift station in at wastewater plant 2 to pull the flow out, or to put one large lift station at wastewater plant 1 and then pump the flow over to the Woodlands. So we're trying to identify, and hopefully the consultant can help us with the feasibility, which is so many different options and ideas and thoughts. It's hard to put a price tag on it, but we're trying not to basically tear up all of the Woodlands, to reroute all of the lines and find the most cost-effective and most efficient way to move that flow without tearing up the Woodlands.
Chris, I have a question. And Scott, I want to thank you for your clarifying question. So I'm getting the sense that to consolidate wastewater treatment 1 into wastewater treatment plant 2, so that we have one facility that handles the discharge for both, that total estimate of cost is in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 million.
If you, and I'm going to bounce on the slides here. And so what I'm going to use is using the expansion of wastewater plant 2, 100 to 150 million. If I back up and add in the renewal of wastewater plant 2, which was the clarifying question that was asked. Now, if you take that 100 to 151 million, added on top of the 271 to the 354, you are correct. It's roughly 371 million to 500 million.
So that's $500 million.
That is. Now, I will say this
and,
is,
and then we don't do anything to address wastewater treatment plant 3. That still stays in place and continues operating.
correct. At this point in time, it may be efficient to move over plant 3. Plant 3, haven't looked at too much. You're probably talking maybe 20 to 30 million to renew that plant. The general thought was the bulk of the efficiency will be at plant 1 and plant 2. During the feasibility study, if the trustees would like, or the MUDs in general, we could look at and say, okay, what would it take to build a plant at 15 MGD? So if at some point y'all wanted to move the flow from plant 3 to plant or the consolidated facility, it'd be there. But those are details we can cross at some point.
Okay. Thank you.
So
fast forward a little bit. What we tried to take a look at and say, okay, what would be the potential impact to the residential water bill, wastewater bills? This is in addition to the current bill. So what you're looking at here, if you're looking in, let's just 2025, the 8 MGD consolidation, and where it says high after consolidation high, this is on the high side, assuming worst case scenario from what we've estimated. The expansion of 8 MGD is that green line that you see going up to almost $20, about $18, $19, in addition to what the residents are currently paying. With the stage renewal, the high estimate, you see that line that starts in 2021 pretty much at zero, then gradually goes up to about 20, 30, then kind of picks up to an additional 35, kind of flat lines and goes down from there. That is only going to be the expansion of plant 2 by 8 MGD and only plant 1 stage renewal. When we went through this before and we had all the combined graphs, and there's multiple graphs here, it took you all the way out to 2090 when you're looking at the stage renewal of plant 1 and plant 2 before the estimated bonds are paid off at that point. The point of this slide is, if you look in the top left, the average wastewater bill in 2021 is $26. If you went with consolidation on high estimate, in 2030, you're looking at roughly another $20 to the bill. So average bill would roughly be $46, assuming no other rate increases or anything else, just apples to apples. In 2030, if you did the stage renewal, you'd be adding $5 to the average bill, so $31. But if you push out to 2045 with the consolidation, you're still looking at roughly $20 added to the bill, so roughly $46 average bill. Whereas if you add 35, you're looking closer to 60.
So this is Scott Custer. So I just want to make sure that I understand what you're trying to do here. There's a lot of ways to nitpick how you represented this. I don't want to do that, obviously, but the green line is corresponding to expanding or new facility. I can't figure out what scenario you're correlating that to. Can you repeat that, please?
Good point. The green line correlates to the expansion of wastewater plants.
Okay, so it's purely expansion, but does not include the rolling in of the addition, to President Hurd's point, the incremental cost or the continued cost of renewing Workweek wastewater plant 2. So it's purely associated with the new addition.
Right.
Okay, so I think this particular chart is not terribly useful until it correlates into the scenarios as they get redefined.
And that's one of the items when the more we talk about this with the audit committee and there's more information, there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of how does this look? How does that look? And that's why it took 3 meetings and multiple hours to get to this point. There were additional graphs that we removed that showed those different options. But at the end of the day, I'll move to the next slide. There's not enough information currently existing to determine if consolidation is feasible. And part of that is the reason we kept meeting with the audit committee is to present a lot of different information, try to narrow down the cost, try to look at this option, that option, those type of things. But also for a lot of things that you are talking about, there's a lot of good questions out there, not only from the trustees, but I'm sure the community has a lot of it as well. So part of it is, what does the community want? And what are they willing to pay for? Because I know a lot of people want a lot of different things, but you tell them the price tag and they're no longer interested. So some of that is the technologies, the alternatives, what level of service is expected, so on and so forth. But also on the technical side, we don't have obviously we have the current O&M cost, but we don't have the potential O&M cost for a consolidated facility. The feasibility study will narrow down the capital cost estimates. It will also include the collection system evaluation, those cost estimates. Potential funding sources. As you are well aware, the Woodlands trying to get funding is not always grants, that is It's not always feasible and possible, but I think it should still be looked at. Are there options for when you're doing something like this? Are there options for low interest financing somewhere? Then, of course, the technical challenge is how do we move the flow from wastewater plant 1 to wastewater plant 2? It sounds simple to me. You put in a lift station, you put a pipe in and it goes, but how do you get that pipe there? How do you route the pipe through the woodlands without disrupting the entire woodlands and still make it possible without crossing an armed leg? These are the type of questions that the consolidation feasibility study will look at and help us define.
You know, I love your bullet. What is the community willing to fund? I guess there's been an article, or folks know about this idea that we're looking at centralization of the plants. And I have a disproportionate number of friends in Mud 7, which is on the kind of the west side of plant number 2. And I guess I have a disproportionate number of friends in that area because I have a fascination with fault lines, and the Panther Branch fault line goes through Mud 7 right there. And in talking with them, they are adamant against having a centralized waste plant behind their homes. They say things like, "We're in a planned community." So I'm just mentioning this because as we present this to the community, it's going to be tough for you've also got the other side of Alden Bridge on the other side of plant number 2. They're going to be very against it. They are the ones that I know in Mud 7. I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Chris, do you have anything else, or does that conclude the report?
Just a few more I'll run through. This item that you're looking at here is the feasibility study overview. High level overview to determine financial feasibility. You're not going for precision, you're going for feasibility. Precision comes a little bit later. Of course, community engagement, and looks at some of those limited details. This is the conceptual scope of the plan. Everything we talked about before. First is a baseline. Review the estimated cost for renewal of plant 1 assets. We can add in plant 2 as well to that. Then on the consolidation, 3 different options. Expand wastewater plant 2, demolish plant 1 that we talked about. Build a brand new 14 MGD facility, demolish plants 1 and 2. And then a consultant identified option, which is maybe, I mean, consultants get paid to be creative, right? So maybe there's something out there that could satisfy a lot of folks that's more feasible that we haven't thought of. Then, of course, the 2 collection system items that we talked about, which is build a lift station transfer flow or a consultant identified option. Point out, this is the process. So this is not a one done, you're locked in, you're done, you have to do consolidation. On the far left is the feasibility study we're talking about. Depending on the options and everything that's thrown in there, the more options, the more can you look at this, what about this, adds to the time, adds to the cost. We have a range of $500,000 to $1 million in 1 year for the study. After that, feasibility study comes in, trustees look at it and say, nope, we don't like it, don't want to do it, you can stop. If you say, yes, I'm interested, let's move forward, then you move into what generally is termed a master plan. This is where you start hammering out specifics. You talk more to the community, you get them involved. You know, those in Alden Bridge, Mud 7, okay, you have concerns. What are your concerns? How could they be alleviated? Community, what do you want? You also look at the permitting requirements, regulatory requirements. You fine tune the numbers, work out routing studies. It's very in-depth, and that's why it's $3 to $5 million estimated in about 2 years. Then you move to preliminary final design and permitting. That's where you're locked in at that point for the most part. You can stop at any point, but at that point, trustees have said, yes, we're going to go forward. We're looking at consolidation, start designs. That's where you're starting to spend $20 to $40 million, 2 to 3 years, and you actually design the facilities, where the lines are going to go, how the plant's going to look, what technology to use, odor control if it's there, other sustainability type options. Then, of course, you go into construction. By the way, these numbers are rounded up to the nearest 100 million, and they do not include each other. So when you're looking at the construction estimate, That is in addition to the other previous numbers.
I would just like to throw out another couple thoughts I had, and those were reactions from the Iron Man contingent. You know, this would, if we consolidate to Plant 2, all of our affluent would be going through more of the Woodlands and into Lake Woodlands. So that was another group that I spoke with that was adamant against it.
Okay.
Chris, this is Eric Hurd. On that construction estimate, based on what we just discussed, shouldn't that be like 200 million to 500 million?
So that's a very good point. I should have pointed out. Thank you. This process is based on the second option, the 14 MGD consolidation. So this is the brand new facility, not the expansion of wastewater plant 2. Also, this estimate does not include that you're doing, like y'all had talked earlier with the clarifying question, where you consolidate 8 MGD and then you add in wastewater plant 2's estimate at that point. This is.
Yeah, I just think you need to correct your slide to provide a more truthful top-end estimate based on the information that was included in the entire report, since this process potentially would have the result of there being a determination to do all of it. And that wouldn't be a top end of 300 million, that'd be a top end of 500 million. So that's all I'm saying. I think that slide just needs to be updated. That's all.
Something else that cost exactly 500 million was the surface water treatment plant, because I've mentioned that in a lot of public open comments at different meetings. And I have to say, boy, that has not gone well. You know, in retrospect, I think that more public education about why the surface water treatment plant was built might have helped Montgomery County residents get more buy-in in paying the surface water conversion fee. But we see how much something like that costs and how much this county has fought it. And even though it's already built, they're still fighting it today.
Yeah,
This is
one
Scott.
more reason to have the full disclosure on the numbers, Chris.
Yes, sir.
This is Scott, because back on the previous slide, just to be sure that I understand what you're suggesting here. So it would be at the end of the feasibility study that there would be a request for a decision on the path forward. Is that correct? So this feasibility study is entirely for the consolidation study, after which I think what you're saying is there's a decision between the wave 1, wave 2 approach and consolidation. You know, I'll just say that in my mind, the consolidation that adds on to work week plant, the plant number 2, and then continues to renew plant 2, in my mind, I can't separate that from a wave 1, wave 2, because the cost seems to be aligned. And then it's a matter of, you know, is it better to have everything in one place or not? But the cost is the same. So I think what you just said is that feasibility study is focused only on blowing up everything. That's probably a crude way to put it and incorrect, but you know, building anew entirely.
Okay, so the feasibility study, what you see on your
It's going to include all those. Okay.
Yes, it includes everything here.
How less expensive is it to only study the brand new plant? Do we get to save 200K on the study, or is it still 500K no matter what?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't looked at it. You're probably looking at roughly around the same number. Just because conveyance is going to take a lot, baseline is going to take a lot. There's a lot of various options in here, but also at the same point in time, I will just say that this is all what we've put together, right? So this is the $50,000 look, if you will. The consultant will spend additional time and fine tune these numbers, because the numbers that I've shown today is what we've put together with some assistance from consultants, you know, just high level type items. The feasibility study, when they study each of these items that you're looking at, they will get not down to the precision level, but they will drop it down a few thousand feet. And our numbers could be off, or they could be a little bit dead on. So Either which way, it's up to the trustees. It's one of those things that before we start replacing these assets and spending tens of millions of dollars, I wanted to bring it across your table, take a look at it. Something you want to go for, we can go for. We're not looking for any vote tonight. This was information. Ask us any questions, follow up, let us know what else y'all need. And if there is something else you want to look at or something we need to take out, then we can talk about that for sure.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a lot more items to cover. I'd like to move on. Jim, do we have anything else we need to discuss on this?
I would like to suggest that we have this as an agenda item at each of the MUDs next week to show this same information and inform all the MUD directors to get this information and get some feedback from them.
Okay, all right. Very good. Well, I'd like to move on if we could. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. Item 11, receive update on GMA 14 Joint Planning Committee.
Mr. Stinson, would you like me to take that?
Yes, please.
This is Ron Kelling. First of all, I want to thank all of y'all who were participating in the meeting last night. Those brave souls of y'all who lasted out the full 3 hours, or 3.5 hours, I got to hand it to you. But it's truly appreciative of all the people who showed up and provide comments. As I've been thinking the last 24 hours about what actually happened last night, is I came to realization that the Lone Star spent 2.5 hours trying to show the world that they have looked at or discussed subsidence in various different presentations over the last 2 years. But they missed the entire point of the question that we were raising. The point that we were raising was at the GMA 14 meeting, Lone Star's representatives said that their board had asked them to provide an update as to where the board stood on certain items. And one of those was that the board couldn't support the use of a DFC statement for subsidence in Montgomery County. So whether or not you listened to it, talked about it, dreamt about it for the last 2 years, their message to GMA 14 was they couldn't support the use of a DFC statement that included subsidence criteria. And so they spent all that time. Obviously, those of you who watched it, they're very angry at me for misrepresenting and beating up on their general manager, but that is what their general manager said. And our question was simply, if that is the position of the board, when did the board make that decision? And was that decision ever discussed in an open meeting? That was our simple question that we had. And everything went from there, and I'm evil, should be shot, hung, whatever they want to do with me for asking that question. But I think it's a valid question. If you represent to the GMA 14 a certain position of your board, I think it's fair to ask, when did that board make that decision? Was it an open session? So after all that was said, then at the end of the night, they never took a vote or took a stance on how they want to vote regarding a criteria for subsidence in a DFC statement. So they kind of left their general manager hung out there, because on February the 24th, GMA 14 is going to come back together and they're going to want to consider and possibly vote on a DFC. And Lone Star's board was very adamant that they aren't ready to make a decision. And so they did not give any instruction to their general manager. So, oh, and by the way, one other thing is when we asked the Lone Star's general manager a week after the GMA 14 meeting about their statement, that it was the board's position and not to have a subsidence criteria, she stated that, well, that statement was incorrect, that it was not the board, that it was simply one of their committees. So anyway, it was a long night. Nothing really was resolved, and we'll see what happens at the GMA meeting in February.
So don't they have to pick one of the three scenarios? Like last May, Zach Holland made the motion that they look at those three scenarios, which we keep seeing over and over again. And don't all three of them have a 1 foot average subsidence in them? So don't they have to pick one of those, right?
They don't have to. They can pick something in between.
Okay.
So, they got basically two bookends and then they have a middle. They can pick somewhere in between. It's preferable that they pick one of those three because that's what they studied.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what they're going to do, and I don't know what GMA 14 is now going to do.
Okay, thanks. Well, they also appointed a new board member named Janice Thigpen, right, from Magnolia?
Yes.
And she has a public Facebook page, and she looks like-minded with the folks on the LSGCD board.
Yes.
That's all.
So more of the same.
More of the same.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody, that did attend that meeting. I'd like to move on now to item 12 on the agenda, receive the attorney's report. Brian?
This is Brian. Brief legislative update. Committee assignments have been made. You can see those on the TLO, Texas Legislature Online website. Things are still pretty quiet up there. We had a couple of lobbyists up there last week and said it felt like there were more National Guardsmen there than there were legislators. So it was kind of strange. So things are moving pretty slow. They have not been in session in Austin that frequently so far. So it's a much slower start than we are accustomed to in the session, but not really surprising considering COVID and some of the security concerns. So that's about it from the legislature right now. We'll of course keep you posted as bills are moving that could impact mud business. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Brian. All right, let's move on to item 13, receive the general manager's report. Jim?
Thank you, Eric. A couple of things. Bob Lux has been serving as the Woodlands Water Agency representative to the Texas Water Conservation Association for a couple of years now, I think, and he has been doing an excellent job, and he has recently been reappointed to the utility district panel. And I just want to get on record that I don't see any need to change. I think Bob is doing a great job. It's helping me out having somebody there covering those meetings and giving time to do other things. So he's going to continue in that role unless there's an objection from this board or from his board. He's a mud director on Mud 60. The other thing I wanted to report is we had talked last month that Brian Yates and I would be reviewing what we call the content or the construction or acquisition of facilities agreement as part of your consolidated district policy manual. We're still looking at that. Don't have any revisions to present tonight or to the MUDs next week, but it's still on our to-do list. And that concludes my report. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Jim. All right, let's move on to item 14, receive update on regional subsidence and groundwater research consortium and science advisory committee engagement with FERC.
I'm very pleased to report that the Science Advisory Committee completed their analysis of the Lone Star Groundwater District Phase 1 subsidence report. Press release went out Monday of this week. I think we have forwarded that information to all of our directors. We'll have links to it certainly in the MUD meetings for next week, but great progress there, and also have the monthly report in your MUD meeting packets next week.
Fantastic. That's great. All right, item 15, receive staff update on matters pertaining to implementation of automated metering infrastructure program.
First thing I want to do is report or a follow-up. We had 2 areas where we had installed poles that residents were concerned about the appearance, the impacts the poles had on their quality of life. one was at the Woodlands Parkway in Kirkendall near the Sterling Ridge Village Center, the HEB there. I have met with the neighborhood there, looking at options that might help with their concerns. I've also met with one group over on the Water Plant 1 in Mud 36, the Slash Pine area. Maybe it's Mud 6. Anyway, the first water plant in the Woodlands off Slash Pine. I've got another meeting with those neighbors tomorrow, and I'm telling the group that I'm going to be looking at options ranging anywhere from painting the pole, putting in a tree-like pole, moving it to a new location, and I will bring those options back to our boards to look at probably, hopefully in March, no later than April. And Mike, do you have any information regarding the installation process?
Sure, this is Mike. We have completed the following muds in this order: 39, 1, and 7 are complete with the AMI meter installation. We're about 95% completed with mud 67, 60 this week. My meter actually got changed this week, and we're about 10 or 11% complete with mud 60. It's going very well, very few complaints. And when we do get a complaint, or if we do get a complaint, the contractor handles it promptly and efficiently. And I really have nothing but praise to say so thus far. I'll answer questions if you have them.
This is Scott Custer. On the prior topic, question for you, Jim. So I appreciate what you said. It sounds like you'll come in with some recommendations for action there. My request is, when you do so, can you please include some pictures, like a tops down view of where the pole's located, and a view relative as you can, just to define the context relative to the homes. I went and eyeballed it, but it's really hard for me to obviously really get a view of it without some more documentation, especially if you're going to ask us to evaluate any recommendations.
And I'm going to bring options for the board to consider. I don't know that I'm going to have a recommendation, but it will be options with cost. And yes, we'll have some aerial photographs to demonstrate this as well. Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on to item 16, receive staff update on SGRA application for additional funding and engineering on Spring Creek, and the separate application for construction funding assistance on modifications to Bear Branch, Panther Branch.
I think Ron Kelly would report that the Spring Branch application did get accepted, and we're looking at putting together an interlocal agreement with all of the funding partners. Is that correct, Ron?
Correct.
And then on the Bear Branch improvement concept, we were thrown a curve on that in the last month or so. We have been reading all of the application for the grant and all the public information that it would be a loan, interest-free loan. That term turned out to be a zero interest bond sale program. So MUD 67 had a special meeting to talk about that. We're going to talk about it again at their meeting next week. But it's thrown a little bit of a curveball in this process, but we hope we can find a way to work through it.
Okay, very good. Anything else on item 16? Is that good?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you. Item 17, discuss and consider ideas for improving Woodlands water operational efficiency. I know there were a couple items you had checked on this month, James. Anything else?
No, nothing for this month. Maureen has put together a list of things that she and other staff members have been working on over the last few months that we'll be presenting next month. A list of quite a number of operational efficiencies and improvements that we've done internally.
Okay, very good. All right, item 18, discuss any matters for placement on the future agenda for next month.
I'm curious about, it seems like the next step in this LSGCD thing is to get a borehole extensometer in the Jasper. Is there anything we can do to facilitate that? Or is Mr. Turco of HGSCD able to do that on his own?
I think it's going to need to be a joint effort between the San Jacinto River Authority, our MUDs, other MUDs in Montgomery County, and the subsidence district.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to do whatever we can to move forward. This LSGCD is a train wreck that just continues. What can we do to show for a fact more subsidence? Would it help? I'm just looking for other avenues because meetings
And also the summary from the HARC Groundwater Consortium and the Science Advisory Committee laid out some options that we're going to be looking in more detail regarding GPS or COOR stations in conjunction with water well sites. So we'll be looking at that.
That's what I was thinking is use HARC to kind of push the issue forward.
This is John Yours. Turco's often said that the cost of the extensometer, depending on how you land it, is between $500,000 and $1 million. So it's a costly endeavor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else for a future agenda?
Trustee Martin, I believe March is the meeting that the board needs to act on as far as the excess cash, and all the conditions have been met. The audit report is out. We know what the cash balance was at September 30th. And according to my calculations, it should be in excess of $400,000 that should be refunded back to the MUDs. So I just asked that that be put on there.
Okay, that sounds good. Jim, if we could add an item for that. Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
Any other items? Okay. There being none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thanks for all your questions, Scott.
You bet. Take care.